Hello, welcome to the mission briefing for Mission 2A, Distress Signal. So, basically, what's going on in this mission is a bunch of rebels are getting tricked into an Imperial ambush. Um, Imperial agents have placed a rebel distress beacon in a bunch of debris, and they're luring out uh, those gullible rebels, always out to rescue their buddies. You know they're always going to try that. And this time it's a trap. Also, something that happens a lot. Uh, so, how is this mission going to work? First thing that we're going to do is place some terrain. So, terrain setup is pretty straightforward. You start with the Imperial player, you alternate placing obstacles. We're going to use debris. I think if you're playing on Vassal, you should definitely be using this debris. That's the thematic choice. If you're playing at home, sometimes you don't have 10 debris tokens. In that case, you can use asteroids too, but try to use debris. And the rules for placing this is beyond range 1 of the table edge, beyond range 1 of each other. So, uh, and players just alternate placing these. I'm just going to throw these on here, kind of willy-nilly. But you get the idea. It's a lot of debris tokens on the table, but it's a lot of space to actually fill up too. Okay, after all those tokens have been placed, the Imperial player, only the Imperial player, is going to go ahead and place 3 satellite tokens. We got 3 here, and they're going to place them greater than range 1 of the table edges, and greater than range 2 of each other. And if you're the Imperial player, you want to be a little careful about where you put these, because these are at the beginning of the mission. These are what the Rebel player is trying to go after. So they're going to be sending their ships out to scan these. These represent basically distress beacons, signals that the rebels are investigating. So they're looking for their buddies, but it's really like these faked faked signals, and ship wreckage out here. So the rebels are going to have to scan all 3 of these before they get uh, a chance to like leave the area or whatever. They have to go after those in the beginning of the mission. We'll get into that in a minute here. Uh, After these satellites are down, the next step is for the rebel player to deploy their squad. They get 110 points. Why don't we make that 5 X-Wing? No, we can't. Can we? Yeah, you can have 5 X-Wings with 110 points. Why not? Okay, so we're going to have 5 X-Wings here. And the rebels can actually put these at range 1 of any table edge. So that not only means you can put them here, 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 but you can actually put them on at range 1 of multiple table edges. So you can do crazy stuff like this. You could have deployment like this, where you've got your X-wings spread out crazy like on 4 table edges. Uh, this may or may not be a good idea, depending on how you're trying to play this mission as the rebels. If you're trying to grab those satellites real fast and just get them all scanned on like turn 1, this is something that you may want to try and do. It may or may not be possible to scan them all. Like if the Imperialists put one in the middle like this, then it may not be possible to get them all turn 1. But this is something you can do. Alternatively, you could just put them on one table edge and take a more conventional approach and try and like stick together. So all of those options are possible, just as long as you're deploying within range 1 of any table edge. Okay, and important point is that the Imperial player does not put their ships on the table at the start of this mission, because they have something special planned. All right, so let's go into the special rules, and we'll get into the Imperial deployment and whatnot in a second here. So, first special rule is that all the rebel ships gain the scan action in their action bar, so they can basically always do this. And the way scan action works is you have to be at range 1 of a little satellite, and as an action, you basically remove it from the board. So no dice, no nothing, you just remove it. It has to be at range 1. And remember that as the rebel, you're basically trying to scan all the satellites. Next special rule is search and rescue mission. And this is basically preventing the rebel player from leaving the play area like a chicken uh, before they have scanned all of these. So basically, the rebel ships need to remove all the satellites. All the satellites need to be off the table before the rebel player starts leaving the play area. And you may or may not want to do that after the Imperial ships show up, but if you leave the play area while there's still satellites on the table, no matter how many turns into the game it is, um, Imperial players, the Imperial player will score points equal to double the squad point cost of your ship, which is a lot. Don't do it. So if this is a 21 point X-Wing, you fly us off the table, Imperial player gets 42 points. Bad deal. Um, next rule. Ambush. Okay, this is where we start talking about the Imperial player. During the end phase of any turn, the Imperial player may deploy all of their ships. When they deploy their ships, each one has to be overlapping a debris token. So let's imagine we're on like turn 2 or 3 here. Rebel players have taken maybe 1 or 2 satellites off at this point, and the Imperial player thinks that they have a good opportunity to ambush the rebels. Let's put the rebels in kind of a weird position here. So the Imperial player thinks that this is a good moment to ambush the rebels. Basically, what's going on here, thematically, these TIE fighters have been hiding out in the debris. Their power, is turned, power's off. They've just been waiting for the order to go, and basically, during this end phase that you decide to deploy as the Imperial player, you get to place all of your ships pretty much anywhere, with the only stipulation being that they have to be overlapping a token, an obstacle token, a debris token. Imperial ships don't receive stress as a result of overlapping the debris token when they are deployed. So this is important. So when I put this TIE fighter here, I don't give it a stress. I don't do this. Right? They don't get any stress for this because they were there the whole time. And the other part of this is that once the Imperial player deploys all their ships, let's put these all out here. So once this is done, thematically, the rebels know that the jig is up, know that the trap has been sprung on them, and at that point you take all the distress signal satellites and you take them off the table, so that the rebels are not constrained in the same way that they are before the Imperials are deployed. So, and then from that point, basically play proceeds normally, right? So that means that next turn, all these rebel ships are going to try and scramble and engage the Imperials. You pretty much start dogfighting, and it's important to remind players that when you place your Imperial ship on this, when you deploy it, you don't get stress from this debris token. But if you deploy it in such a way that it's going to fly over the debris token like this, you're still gonna you get stress from that. So after deploying, they don't get any special debris privileges. All right, so that's one way that the Imperials can deploy. The other way is something. What is this? Get this out of here. Um, the other way that the Imperials might find themselves deploying is if, in fact, the Rebel player manages to remove all the satellites from the board before the Imperial player has deployed. So let's say that the Imperial player didn't deploy uh, that last turn, and in the next turn, Rebels move up like this and remove the last satellite. Now, that happens in the activation phase. So before the end phase, which is when the Imperial player would normally deploy, what happens is we activate the something's wrong special rule. And this reads, if there's no distress beacons on the table during the end phase, the Imperial player must deploy all of their ships if they have not already done so. They must deploy their ships overlapping debris tokens as normal. But this time, the Rebel player may specify 2 debris tokens, and the Imperial player must deploy their first 2 ships on those debris tokens. So, as the Rebel player, I can say, hey dude, I know you're here, I know something's up, and because of that, uh, the Imperial player is going to have a less than optimal deployment. Essentially, the Rebels have like detected you. So I could say, as a Rebel player, you have to put at least 1 ship each on these 2 debris tokens. And the rest of the Imperial ships can sort of get deployed normally for this scenario anyway. So you can, as the Imperial player, put them on whatever, and you can like double up on debris tokens, like I'm doing here. So you can put, multiple Imperial ships on 1 debris token like that. That's totally fine. And then you would start dogfighting normally. Now, the rest of the mission is basically straightforward. You're fighting each other at this point, and there's no other big special rules that you need to worry about. It's pretty straightforward dogfight with a ambush flavoring to it, really. The last thing that you definitely should be thinking about during this mission is the scoring. And that basically works like this. The Rebel player gets, they earn points equal to triple the cost of any Imperial ship destroyed, including the upgrades, so the total ship cost. So if we have an Academy pilot here, let's say he's 12 points. If a Rebel player destroys him, that's 36 points that the Rebel player earns. And the Imperial player also loses squad points equal to the cost of the ship, so that's 12-point loss for the Imperial. So that is, according to my calculations, a 48-point swing. 36 go to the Rebels, 12 get taken away from the Imperials. So, that sucks if that happens to you, if you get ships blown up. The Imperial player also earns more points than usual, but not the same. They get double the squad points for blowing up ships. So it would be, let's say this is a rookie pilot with no upgrades, that would be 42 points for the Imperial player and minus 21 to the Rebel player. So for both sides, and that's basically because there's no other objectives in this mission. The stakes are a little higher, so we get decent point scores. So as the Imperial player, you want to, you know, you probably want to ambush the rebels before they force you to deploy, because they can, essentially make you put your ships in weird places, right? Like imagine if the rebel player was down this corner and they made the Imperial player put ships on this debris and this debris, then Imperial player is in a super bad place because not only uh, uh, is the rebel player scoring triple and they're only scoring double, but also baked into this mission balance is a 10-point advantage for the rebel player. And that's because normally the Imperial player is going to be ambushing them. They're going to be coming in like behind them. They're totally dictating the terms of that opening engagement. And that can be really devastating under the right circumstances. Unless the rebel player manages to get all your satellites off the table before you deploy. The flip side of this is that as we talked about in the beginning, if you spread out your deployment as the rebel player, depending on where that Imperial player put those satellites, it is sometimes possible to pick up all the satellites on the first turn. But that essentially that means that you're pretty much always going to have a. In order to do that, you have to be like really spread out, and then the Imperial player can dump all their ships all over, one or two of your ships and just wipe it off the table. And that does not sound very fun. So you gotta be careful about doing stuff like that. Don't just go for that. It sounds cool, but it may backfire, or it may not. Depends on your squad composition here. Squad composition is a big factor for this mission. You need, as a rebel, you're definitely durability is something that you want to be going for. As the Imperial, burst damage is really good for this mission. You want to punch, you want to knock out those rebel ships. Well, you have that advantage on that first turn. Because if you don't press that advantage, and the rebels just start dogfighting with you on more or less equal terms, you're working from a 10-point disadvantage. That's hard to come back from. And on top of that, they're earning triple points. You really got to make that ambush stick. But, on the other hand, the rebels get ambushed. So they're not exactly having an easy time in this mission. That is basically it. The mission ends when there's no pilots remaining from either side on the table, from either one side. So if all the basically the mission ends when all the ships from one side have been destroyed or they flee off the table. And that is when the mission is over. And that is pretty good. That is pretty much it. Like I said, think about, as the Imperial player, think about your ambush. As a Rebel player, think about that Imperial player's ambush. As you're flying around picking up these satellites, obviously you want to be careful not to put yourself in too much of a compromising position as you're doing that. The way this mission plays out is extremely dependent on how that first ambush goes. All right, good luck.